What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. I am super excited about this episode because in the past weeks we've been fielding a lot of questions about people that are endeavoring in hot composting, but started out with a compost pile that was hot and suddenly got cold and they don't know how to get it hot again. And so I want to make this video because I think it's going to help a lot of you out, because this is going to be the top 3 reasons your compost pile will go cold. So let's get right into it. So the first reason your compost pile is either going cold or not even getting hot at all is because of the size. Compost piles, regardless of their size, rely on what we call biomass. Biomass is the amount of available organic matter that can be broken down. And so in a hot compost pile, we need a minimum of 9 cubic feet of biomass. This means it needs to be at least 3 feet wide, by 3 feet long, by 3 feet tall. And that means that you're going to have 9 cubic feet of biomass. Now, what does biomass do? Well, biomass is the organic matter. And the organic matter can be grass clippings, it can be food scraps, it can be fall leaves. It really doesn't matter what it is necessarily, as long as it's organic matter. And what it does is it heats up because it's insulating the microbial activity. So you see, when we compost, we rely on bacteria. A lot of times people don't know what breaks down their compost pile. And if it's a cold compost pile, you know, sometimes there'll be worms and different, insects or even fungi that can come in and break down the compost pile in a cold compost. But you still rely on about 80% of your composting to occur through microbes. Like different bacteria. And there's 2 types of bacteria in the world. There's aerobic and anaerobic. And those different bacteria are greatly what dictates the status of your compost pile. If your compost pile has a lot of aerobic bacteria, that aerobic bacteria is, think of aerobics. You're working out real fast. Okay, so when you're doing aerobics, think about that aerobic bacteria. You get really hot, you get really sweaty. And so that heat is actually caused from the bacteria, and that having enough biomass means that it will insulate the bacteria's actions, resulting in a hot core. The outer part of the compost pile we call the shell, and the shell doesn't really break down at all. So that leads us to the second reason why your compost pile does not break down, because if it is large enough, maybe you're not flipping it. See, the shell does not break down because there's not enough insulative properties here. You'll find that the core of the compost pile, the thing that is actually breaking down, that's the engine of the compost pile, full of aerobic bacteria. It's in the center. It is in the very center. And oh man, that is just a beautiful sight right there. You see, we just flipped this. And this sucker is warm, and you can see the difference right here. Look at that. There is the core. We just flipped this about maybe 5 days ago. So it's due for another flipping. Look at the difference. This is just in 5 days. This is the shell. This is the core. This is real nice and warm. There was a nice steam that was created, and you can see here the bacteria are creating this, there's actually fungi that are coming in here, and this is fungal inoculation at its finest. This usually happens on your core because it's damp, it's humid, mold can come in and break things down. But this is not the goal. This white stuff here is good. It's good to see, but it'll actually die. Once we start flipping this more, the fungus actually does not like the heat, and that will die. And that's a reason why we're relying so much on aerobic bacteria, because there's not as much fungus, there's not as many, if any, worms or anything like that. So we're relying on the aerobic bacteria. And what happens when we flip it is we are actually incorporating air into the compost pile. So we're going to flip it here and we're going to give it a real good flipping. essentially turning the inside out and the outside in about every 4 to 5 days, or after the compost shrinks by 30%. And what that does is it actually incorporates air into the compost pile. The reason why your compost pile is cooling down is because of a lack of oxygen. You see, aerobic bacteria actually means oxygen loving. And if you are adding oxygen to your compost pile, you're essentially giving the bacteria what they need, which is oxygen. If you do not flip it whatsoever, you'll notice that it gets to be kind of slimy and smelly. And that slimy and smelliness is caused from anaerobic bacteria. That means oxygen deprived or no oxygen bacteria. The third and final reason why your compost pile goes cold, it's too dry. You have to have water in your compost, folks. If you don't have water, your compost pile is going to go cold. If your compost pile is dry, there's not enough water there for the bacteria to feed on. Water is the lifeblood of every living thing. Doesn't matter if it's you or I, or something that's just so microscopic that you need a microscope to actually focus in on. Those bacteria also need water. And they need water in order to thrive and survive in good numbers. And that's what creates the heat. And that's why the center of our compost pile that hasn't had a chance to dry out yet, not only is it warm, but look how fast it's breaking down. Look at how dark the stuff is already. And you can see here, look, it's really nice and damp. If I squeeze it, no water comes out. It's got a beautiful earthy smell, but it's noticeably darker. And that darkness is caused from moisture. And this stuff here that I showed you in the beginning, this stuff here is brand new. Well, it's not really brand new, but it's stuff that hasn't been turned into the core yet. This is a relatively new compost pile that we just created about 3 weeks ago. And so we flipped this a couple times, and there's still a lot of unbroken down matter. And that matter takes a while to absorb that moisture and really to get going. So we're soaking this, I find, probably every other day to maybe every 3 days or so. You're not soaking wet to the point where it's sopping wet, because then what that does is the water actually fills up all the air gaps, and the air is what the bacteria need as well. So if you soak it with water, think swamp. Swamps smell. That's because there's lots of water, but there's no oxygen. So what you need is a very good balance of oxygen to water, because they need the water and they need the oxygen. Too much, if any, is actually going to promote anaerobic bacteria. Or too much water. You can't have really too much oxygen, but you do need water as well in there. So having a good ratio means that you're going to have good aerobic activity. And so those are the top 3 reasons why a compost pile will go cold. But I want to give you a bonus one as well. A bonus one is because you're adding stuff to an already composting pile. You see, if you want to continue the composting process, sometimes people think, I'm going to continue the composting process by regularly adding material to our compost pile. And it will break down, it will compost, but you'll find that over time, once the majority of the compost has been broken down, and your compost pile is actually on the cooling down process, there's not enough organic matter to create thermal mass there, and the compost pile is breaking down very quickly. You'll find that the bacteria, even in high numbers, just are not breaking things down. And so what what you'll find is that you'll add some stuff to it, and it might heat up a little bit and then slow down very quickly. And that's just because you're not really ever getting enough thermal mass there to create a hot core again. And those bacteria, they're kind of like, okay, all right, I kind of did my job, I'm kind of done. And so they don't really worry about it. And so what you'll find I see this so often, is people will create a compost pile that looks beautiful, looks nice and dark and rich, ready to add to their garden. And what do? They add more to it. That's the worst thing you can do. Start a new compost pile. That's why, well, this compost corral here has a pumpkin growing in it, which is huge, by the way. But that was our finished compost there, that the pumpkin's growing in. But what we do is we actually start a new compost pile. In a normal circumstance, when there's not a pumpkin there, which there won't be next year, I love it, just it's kind of messy and it's in the way. that would be our finished pile. We'd move all of our finished compost over to that corral and start a new one here. Don't add to the same one time and time and time again, because eventually you'll find that it just cools down. It is ready to use, it's finished, and all that extra stuff you're putting on is actually just kind of messing up the system in place. So I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to give this video a huge thumbs up. I really do love seeing your support on these videos in the form of thumbs up and comments letting me know you enjoyed the video, or other information that you wish I would touch on. And so please post in the comments box below any questions you might have. It helps me create future content. So as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home. I'll catch you all later. See ya.